So it's my pleasure today to introduce you to our FLC, Faculty Leading the Change session, Inclusive Classrooms, Nurturing Linguistic Diversity for Student Success. As you can see, we have fabulous presenters in the room today. We have Gaby Johnson, who is the Academic Program Coordinator in SIUS. We have Melissa Sharpe, who is a Learning Experience Designer in PDCD. Judi Blakely, who is an Academic Program Coordinator in the Higher Education and Principal Preparation College of Education. We also have Hillary Wentworth, who is a Senior Learning Experience Designer in PDCD. And finally, we have our moderator, Dr. Kim Critchlow, who is a core faculty member in the DBA program that is part of the College of Management and Human Potential. I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Critchlow. Welcome.
And well, I guess it helps to unmute myself. So I found my unmute button. Thank you so much, Lita. Thank you for this wonderful introduction. And I'm so happy to be here, as are the rest of the team here. What we'd like to do is to start with a poll, if we may. Lita, would you start that poll for us, please? Wonderful. So we have 3 questions. Here's the first one. Language is deeply connected to identity. True or false? Just submit your responses in there, and then we'll go to the next poll. I'm just going to share the response with us.
All right, looks like 70% have participated. We'll give a couple people 5 more seconds.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong answer. There's just an answer. Oh my, 100% think it's correct. Wow, okay. Well, thank you very much for that. And that is true. Lita, can we look at the next poll, please?
We sure can. Let me launch that one. All right, we shared the results for the first poll. I'm going to stop sharing, and now let's go back to our poll, and we are going to poll number 2. Oh, you shall see that on your screen.
Yes, thank you so much. Course design can support linguistic diversity. So course design can support linguistic diversity. True or false?
All right, I'm going to share the results.
100% think that one is true as well. Okay, wonderful. And let's look at the final poll question. Flexible assessment methods give students various ways to demonstrate their understanding. True or false?
Give everyone just a second. All right, here we go.
100% say that one is true as well. And as a matter of fact, you're also very correct. They're all very true. And so the panel is going to speak more to that. And about supporting language diversity in the classroom, and the fact that it's integral to supporting Walden University's mission as well, which is to provide a diverse community of care professionals with the opportunity to transform themselves as scholar practitioners so that they can affect positive social change. Hello, my name is Dr. Kim Critchlow, and I'm core faculty with the College of Management and Human Potential Doctor of Business Administration program, and I will be moderating this presentation, the purpose of which is to introduce to you the Language Diversity Working Group, to share ways course design can support and may support language diversity, to identify some resources that can be used to support language diversity in the classroom, and to highlight some helpful strategies to engender a classroom supportive of language diversity. With me is Gaby Johnson, Academic Coordinator for the School of Interdisciplinary Undergraduate Studies, Melissa Sharpe, Learning Experience Designer for Product Development, Classroom Development, and Judi Blakely, who I don't see is in there quite yet, but should be on her way. And she is the coordinator for the Riley College of Education and Leadership, Higher Education and EDS programs. And then finally, we have Senior Designer Learning Expert Hillary Wentworth. And together, we represent 5 of the dozen or so members of the Language Diversity Working Group. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Gaby Johnson, who will introduce to you the mission of the Language Diversity Working Group and other important facts. Gaby?
Thank you so much, Kim. I'm very excited to be here. And Lida, if you would just continue to go through one more. There you go. As Kim mentioned, we are, the group that you see before you is a small representation of the members of the Language Diversity Working Group, which is an arm of the Inclusive Teaching and Learning Advisory Council. And our mission is to partner with the Walden University community to create a learning environment where all are encouraged and feel safe to display their cultural identity through the use of their communicative traditions and unique language variants for self-expression. We enact this mission through the following strategies: identifying areas of the curriculum where academic and/or writing expectations do not align with or represent diverse linguistic traditions, implementing change in course and training contexts, facilitating dialogue to gather faculty, staff, and student input and perspectives, exploring language diversity and learning together, and engaging in continuous improvement and action to identify opportunities for change. The presentation that you are about to experience comes out of that mission that we have to forward and foster this linguistic diversity at Walden. So I'm gonna get off camera because I just do better presenting when I can't see myself. And my privilege today is to introduce you to what language diversity means and why it is important. And I will do so by giving you 10 brief statements explaining it all. Number 1, there are multiple dialects of English in the USA. The United States is linguistically very diverse. And I'm not talking about other global languages like Spanish or French. Within the English language, linguists have identified over 24 different dialects, each with its own consistent and complex lexical, grammatical, and phonological rules. You may be most familiar with dialects like African American Vernacular English or Chicano English, but there's also Appalachian English and Miami English, for example. Number 2, there is no one correct version of English. In the US, we've come to see Standard American English as the, quote, correct version of English, thereby implying that any other dialects like African American Vernacular or Southern English are merely English spoken wrongly. But linguists disagree. Based on the definition of a language, there is really no correct version of English. As I said before, all recognized dialects have complex grammar rules and other features that vary from dialect to dialect, but are consistent across speakers of that dialect. So ask yourself, why is Standard English the standard? Who decided that? Who was in the room where it happened, to quote the musical Hamilton? And who was excluded? How did we arrive at that conclusion? And who had everything to gain from it? But that's a conversation for another day. Number 3, Standard English is not everyone's home language. It's no surprise then that people across the country grow up speaking different dialects of English as their home language. It can look as simple as people who say soda, soft drink, pop, or Coke, or saying that someone is getting down from the car instead of out of the car. Or how about the difference between throwing a birthday party or making a birthday party? But the difference in dialects can also be more controversial in charge. Like when people say, I seen the movie versus I saw the movie, or I should have went to the store versus I should have gone to the store. And yet, all those examples are forms of dialects that people use across the country consistently and correctly according to their dialect. Number 4, linguistic prejudice is real. We all have unconscious biases, and one way to make them conscious is to explore them. Think about how you felt when I gave examples of the different ways that people speak, particularly the more charged examples. While people tend to be more tolerant and patient with folks whose first language is not English, even giving them the benefit of the doubt when they speak in ways that deviate from standard English, those who speak dialects other than standard English don't always get that treatment. They're often seen as less intelligent, less competent, or less educated and treated as such. Linguistic prejudice is a factor that affects students as they encounter biases or struggle with feelings of inadequacy based on the mistaken belief that they are not linguistically prepared for academic work. Regina Lippi-Green, linguist and author of the book English with an Accent, stated that linguistic discrimination is, quote, so commonly accepted, so widely perceived as appropriate, that it must be seen as the last backdoor to discrimination, a door that stands wide open still. Number 5, linguistic diversity is part of inclusive teaching and learning. This conversation we're having falls squarely into Walden's efforts towards inclusive teaching and learning because, number 6, language diversity is beneficial. One of our goals in academia is to expose students to different perspectives. We discuss the importance of diversity in enriching our courses, so we must remember that language diversity benefits a student who is developing a larger worldview, just as any other type of exposure to different perspectives is beneficial for them. Number 7, language is deeply connected to identity, as all of you seem to already know. Linguists know that identity and language cannot be separated. Our students bring their whole selves with them, including their home language. We do them a deep disservice, actually, when we treat their home language as, quote, bad English. As Gloria Ansaldúa, a Chicano writer and activist, stated, if you want to really hurt me, talk badly about my language. Ethnic identity is twin-skin to linguistic identity. I am my language. Number 8, students need spaces to use their own voices. Research into social presence and its importance in student satisfaction and learning shows that one of the ways we build trust and safety in our classrooms is to foster an environment where students feel comfortable bringing their whole selves into the educational process. Having spaces where they can use their voice is essential. The class cafe is a good option for many of us. I model for my students a more informal type of conversation in the class cafe. I use y'all because so much of my time in the US has been spent in the South. And I may even throw a word in Spanish or two, which is my native language. The code switching that I'm demonstrating can even serve as a pedagogical activity in writing for the context and the audience. Number 9, effective communication can happen using your home language. We can provide spaces like that for our students because comprehension and communication are not tied exclusively to a type of dialect. If I say to you, I reckon this weekend y'all may could come with me to my folks who live over yonder if you have a hankering for some good old Southern barbecue. Most of you would know what I meant, or at the very least can understand from context, this is an invitation to eat at my parents' next weekend. I can't mimic the Southern accent, but I'm pretty fluent in Southern American English because I'm married to a South Carolinian and I lived in the South for 15 years. Now, obviously, I would not write this in an email to my boss, and we teach our students about context, audience, and writing purpose. However, communication happens undeniably, so providing a place where students can converse in the dialect they're most comfortable using is a way to foster trust and inclusivity. And number 10, standard academic English is a tool. While accepting and supporting students bringing their whole identity to a course is essential to help them succeed, we realize that, of course, our students need to be able to write scholarly and communicate both orally and in writing in the ways expected of a scholar practitioner with a higher education degree. They need to learn standard academic English to succeed. We must keep in mind that for many students, this is in essence a brand new language. So our aim here is to help us reframe standard academic English from being the, quote, correct English to being another tool for student success, a skill they can develop through practice, scaffolded assignments, and careful instructional feedback. In doing so, we hope to combat both faculty and students' perception that a student who enters our courses, particularly at the undergraduate level, most comfortable and familiar with a different dialect is either less intelligent or less competent as a writer than some of their peers who are more familiar with the preferred dialect. Because when you think of standard academic English as a tool, it will change the way you provide feedback to your students. So, how do we ensure that our classrooms promote linguistic diversity? Well, that is what Melissa and then Judi will tell you about next. So I'm going to pass it on to Melissa.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Melissa Sharpe. I'm representing product development and classroom design in my role as a senior learning experience designer. During course development, our product team, we take course outcomes, vision, hopes and dreams, accreditation requirements, and we turn it into content that can be built and delivered effectively in an LMS while infusing everything with current best practices. This includes supporting linguistic diversity and creating inclusive classrooms as we work on those updates. So yes, course design can support language diversity in several ways, and today I'll highlight 3, which you may have seen or will soon see in the courses you teach. And those are assignment and discussion prompts, learning resources, and the rubrics that are built into Canvas. Assignment and discussion prompts can be constructed in a way that clarifies a specific role that a student is filling in a scenario, and this provides openings for language diversity. For example, a discussion may have a student assume the role of an experienced social worker who is mentoring a new social worker. The language in that discussion is going to be casual and conversational, but still professional. It's not going to read like a standard APA academic paper. Later, however, that student may work on a research-based paper that is going to require that standard academic English and APA style. A course like that has opportunities for students to practice clear communication in multiple modes. Next, those expectations can be stated in the prompt or the to prepare sections for the discussions and assignments. When we build it in, we are making room for language diversity as the default. Imagine a course where language expectations are always defined. There's always a bullet point waiting to be customized in that prompt. That means we have considered language and language diversity, and we have built it into the course design. Otherwise, I think we all know that there can tend to be a bias to default to standard academic English, even when it's not most appropriate. Not all students are going to leave us and enter into careers where they only communicate in that standard academic style. So when we build it into the prompts, we are making it more visible and obvious, both to students and ourselves. Another way we support language diversity in course design is to include a variety of learning resources every week or every module discussion and assignment. By including formal academic papers, media that has casual and spoken language, blog posts, news media from experts, students will see how language varies in different settings. It also shows that the scholar who may write informal web content can also publish in academic journals and the switching that they do between those two. We also try to include resources that serve as examples for students by making sure if we're asking students to produce a certain type of text in an assignment, there are resources that mirror this. So casual resources for casual language, formal resources for formal language. And then the last detail I want to highlight is that we design rubrics to support language diversity as well. This is very important as it reduces the likelihood of a student being penalized for using something other than standard academic English when the assignment allows for that variation. The writing row in a rubric, we like to weigh them so that students can pass an assignment based on ideas and content, even if they get a little ding on their mechanics. Next, we watch the wording in these writing or mechanic rows to ensure that they allow for diverse language in a way that mirrors the prompt or allows you as faculty to make that call. Also, we frame the way we think about language by changing what we call non-standard academic English differences, deviations, instead of errors. And on the next slide, you'll see an example of this. And this means if a student is required to use standard academic English and they don't, it is not framed or considered to be a mistake or an error, but rather it is a deviation or an omission, and this honors language diversity in the classroom. And you can see that here from an actual rubric in that first sentence. Now, I would like to hand it over to Judi Blakely to talk about in-class strategies for faculty.
All right, fostering language diversity in the classroom is essential for creating inclusive and supporting learning environments where all students feel valued and empowered to participate. So we're going to discuss some of the practical strategies to promote language diversity. As you see here, these are examples, incorporate the diverse examples and context into lectures. These are ways that you can utilize and incorporate language diversity. You can have language diversity in your discussions and assignments. You can utilize materials that showcase different linguistic styles, ensuring each student's encounter a variety of expressions. I always say celebrate multilingualism. Recognize and celebrate the linguistic diversity within your classroom. Encourage students to share information about their native languages, dialects, and culture backgrounds. I do this at Walden in the chat area, not the chat, the cafe, where when we meet the students, I share information about my background, and I tell them that they're welcome to share information about theirs. And they usually, once they see some sharing, they feel comfortable sharing. So that's a good way too. And it lets you know who your students are at the very beginning of the semester. You can tell, who's who, and it can help you with their class. Language exchange partnerships. Facilitate language exchange partnerships among students. You can pair students, with different language backgrounds and have them work on assignments together. We do at Walden have a peer mentor program where students are able to help students, and I found that to be very successful. And if you want more information about that, feel free to, email me and I'll share that with you. Next slide. Okay, these again are in-class strategies to promote language diversity. Flexible assessment methods. Every single thing does not have to be just that standard test. Just like to know something, you don't have to always have a written paper. There are so many ways that you can do assessments. And yes, we do follow the assessments of our courses, but we can add or mix in other things. I encourage you and urge you to consider flexible assessment methods that accommodate language diversity. Utilize the multilingual learning resources, and we do have a lot here at Walden. Have a language-friendly classroom environment. Create a language-friendly classroom by displaying posters, bulletin boards, and I do that with my background when I do Zoom lessons and team lessons. We have so many Walden backgrounds also that you can put up. Next slide. All right, more in-class strategies to promote language diversity. We've spoken about the peer assistant program, which is very helpful. Students respond to each other in a way much differently than that teacher-student relationship. So the more relationships you can create, student to student, teacher, student, is very helpful. It makes the student feel welcome and a part of. They're included. Again, that language-friendly environment, create a language-friendly classroom. And as we said, with your posters, your bulletin boards, and they can be your backdrops on your team meetings and also on your Zoom meetings. Next slide. Okay, so basically by implementing these classroom-specific strategies, you as an instructor can play a pivotal role. You create an environment that not only recognizes the benefit of language diversity, but it incorporates it and it celebrates it. And that's what we have to do. There's not a right or wrong. There's just a difference in a variety of different language backgrounds. Next slide. All right. Okay. Now, this interactive media piece is a follow-up to the presentation, and I encourage all of you to look at this, all right? And in it, you'll see examples of diversity and equity in the program. Does anybody else want to speak on this?
Yeah,
slide?
I'd like to invite Hillary Wentworth
Yes, okay.
to come join the presentation and speak about this piece, if you would, please.
Sure.
Thank you, Judi.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Yes, so this piece is an interactive media that you can kind of flow through at your leisure, and it's meant to continue the conversation that we have started today. And in it, you will see examples that we've crafted as a working group as to how language diversity can show up in the classroom and how it can be a welcoming and affirming thing. And we also invite you at the end of this interactive media piece to share your own ideas and what you do in the classroom so that we can really create a good knowledge base and idea generator around this topic. So it is in the chat if you would like to explore that link. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Hillary. That's wonderful. And I highly recommend that you all go in there. And thank you to the members of this committee as well, the Language Diversity Working Group. That was a wonderful presentation. I highly recommend each of you to go into the chat room and open that and download that piece that Hillary was just speaking about. It's just fabulous, and it shares a lot of great information regarding ways in which to work with the students and how to make them feel included, and in your feedback and in many different ways that you might interact with that student. So I ask you the question. So we come back to the start of this all over again, right? So we had those poll questions that I asked you to respond to, true or false. So what do you think? Did we provide enough evidence to you to support your response that each of those poll questions were true? That language diversity is, it can be the identity of the particular student, and that flexible assessment could help to promote inclusivity in the classroom. So I ask you that. Did we provide enough evidence to you based on what we presented here? Feel free to come off of mute and respond, or put something in the chat room, your responses to that. And then at the same time, definitely. Thank you, Chris. She says definitely. And feel free to share some feedback on some of your takeaways from this. We're very open to understanding how you view this. So for example, I'm just going to share one thing. One of the participants yesterday emailed me afterwards, and this is why I'm asking you to share here and ask any questions that you may have. They emailed me yesterday outside of this and wanted to know, well, how do we apply this to the classroom to, say, doctoral students? So for example, are we saying, and not just doctoral students, but the concern was, are we saying that anything goes? So let me ask the panel to think about that. So are we saying that anything goes? Any language is acceptable? Let's start with Gaby. Would you mind starting that out? And then I'm going to move over to you, Judi, just after
Sure.
that.
Okay.
It is probably the most common question that we get anytime we discuss linguistic diversity. And No, we are absolutely not saying, but again, you said something about, is any language acceptable? Yes, any language is acceptable. Students come with their home languages, and we have no foundation to say to them your language is wrong. But what we can say to them is, when you enter an academic environment, it's kind of like if you went to Spain, right? People in Spain speak Spanish, so you would be expected to learn and try to communicate in Spanish. When you enter an academic environment, we use standard academic English, which is very similar to standard American English. If you grew up speaking standard American English, you have a more firmer grasp of standard academic English. That's a little bit of a side conversation. But that is to say also that some of our students actually come to us with a bit of an advantage over others because they grew up speaking a closer version of standard academic English than others. But we frame it to students as, you are learning a new way of communicating. It's the way that we communicate in academia. And we use certain grammar and phonological rules when we communicate. So this is what we expect you to say. If you grew up saying, you know, I live in Appalachia, and here in West Virginia, everybody says should have went. Everybody. It doesn't really matter what degree you have. It's when you're having a conversation, an informal conversation, everybody says should have went. If I had a student from West Virginia and I was talking to them about scholarly writing, I would say, you know, let's use Grammarly, because there is a certain way, a certain grammatical structure that we need to use in academic writing that Grammarly will help you recognize. And Grammarly would correct that should have went to should have gone as part of the academic writing. But I cannot say to my peers here, you're speaking wrongly, because it is correct within the Appalachian way of speaking. And to me, it was a revelation when I realized that people with doctorate degrees say should have went when they have informal conversations, because that's what how they grew up speaking when they're not speaking academically or when they're not speaking formally. So all of that to say, we definitely expect our students to adhere to standard academic English at all levels, including undergraduate. But we frame it as a tool that they are learning. And by the time they get to doctoral degrees, I would imagine, if we've done our job right, that they would be pretty well versed. They would be fluent in this language. When they come to us in the first term, they might be a little less familiar. But by the time they get to the doctoral level, hopefully they have developed that skill to a degree. So I don't know if that answers the question, Kim. We are not saying anything, but that is not at all the message to take away from this.
Yes, and that's what I heard from you. Thank you. And I thought that explanation was very good. And I'm hoping, because this is being recorded, I'm going to invite the person that presented that question to me to listen to your response. I think that they would be pleased with that. Judi, did you want to add to that at all?
Well, Gaby answered it very well. And my add-on would be that as we work with students, we want to develop them and expand them. So it's not that they have to choose and have one. They can have 2, 3, or 4. Just like you have people who speak different languages, Spanish, French, English. It's also that way with the academic language. So that person will have their culture or the language that they use, and they will also learn. So I would say, like on a scale of 1 to 10, you don't want a person to just go from 1 to 5 or a person from 5 to 10. You don't have to choose. You can have it all. You can speak casually with your friends and family using whatever dialect you're most comfortable with. And for academic English or language, you would use that too. And so we say that we want to educate you where you have the whole vernacular of language as opposed to being pigeonholed into one. Again, Gaby said it all, but we want everybody to learn and expand themselves into more and greater languages. So we're not saying that you take anything. We're saying that basically we widen the horizon. It's just like if I were on an interview, I would speak in a different format with interview questions. Or I always say, like a lawyer has legal terms and documents, but they don't speak to us in that legal terminology. So what we're teaching the students basically is to present the language where you are. As Gaby said, if you're in Spain, you expect Spanish. When you're in a university, you expect academic language. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the two of you. That was, I think that was a very, very good explanation. And I think that the questioner, the person that presented this question to me will be very pleased with that. I want to share that Hillary, one of our colleagues in this working group, just uploaded a wonderful video. She said, "This is a great video on using 3 Englishes." If you're interested in exploring more of what Judi was just saying. So it's a YouTube video. And so please go there and take a look at that as well and see what that's all about. Thank you so much, Hillary, for finding that and sharing that with us. So there was another question that was presented to me. So this particular person had was sitting here and was really thinking about this and just kind of figuring out, well, how do I ask this question? And so I'm not sure how to ask this in the general population. So I'm gonna ask this of you, Kim, privately. So here was the other question. You know, part of the presentation was about APA and Standard Academic English, SAE, and APA, applying APA. And so the person says, I agree with that APA is too strict in many assignments. But if someone writes in a dialect for the assignment and then puts in parentheses appropriately, but it is unfamiliar to the instructor, how can they fairly, accurately assess it? Okay, I think that's a very fair question. How can the faculty fairly and accurately assess the assignment that is written in perhaps a different dialect? The response is appropriate, the student's response, but it's in a different dialect. Let's see, Judi, you want to?
It's very much like if you read poetry or you go to plays and you see the different language and the different dialects, but you accept it in that I guess you say the way it's framed. If they actually list it out that way and recognize it as that different language, I think that you can really, when I say accept it, you can grade it. And I think that the one thing that we have to always realize is that we're not all 100% alike. Like, you know, we all have our individualities. And in doing so, we learn a lot too. I wish I had this. It's a piece I saw on the internet where every word is kind of misspelled, but it's spelled not phonetically. And it says, if you can read this, you know, and it's like, I went down to the store because of this or that, you know, but I think you can grade it and you can grade it within that area, you know, just like with poetry. When I read a poem, I don't really decide how that person should write or what they use, that creativity. And if I think that if the person marks it off in their paper that they are citing it that way, you know, I can understand, and I'm sure they're citing it that way to, how do I say it, to get a better understanding of what they're saying or what the paper is talking about. Like if I talked about, maybe if I talked about inner city dialect, then I'm sure I would have some examples of it. And I would feel bad if my teacher said, well, these aren't real words, but if those are the examples of the dialect that I'm speaking of, something like that. So
Yeah. Thank you for that. Gaby, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Sure. My first reaction hearing that question is, what were the directions for the assignment?
Yeah.
If the directions are to use formal academic language, then the instructor can go to the student and say, this is great. You've done a great job with what you did. However, we need to work on using the appropriate language to do this. It's kind of like if you wrote it in French. We need to translate it to what academic writing should be and help the student understand what that means. Maybe even teach them how to use tools like Grammarly or, whatever it is that you're doing with your students. So that would be the first question. If the assignment allows for informal writing, the student bringing their own dialect. You said that the person said that they did it appropriately, right? So that means they understood what the student wrote. Because if you can't understand it, then you can't tell me that they did it appropriately. So if you're allowing for that diversity of language, then you have to allow for a language that might sound to you that it's not how you would do it. But communication happens. Kind of like what I said with my Southern English example. If communication is happening, and if you look at the rubric that Melissa had shared, in undergraduate, one of the questions that we ask is are the deviations obscuring meaning? If I can't understand you, then that's a conversation to be had. That's a conversation with the student to say, help me, this is unclear to me, I need to understand. But if you can't understand what they said, and you've allowed for a diversity of dialects, then you assess the content. You assess what the student said, the critical thinking, the application of the resources. There's an article by a woman named Catherine Savini that she printed it for Inside Higher Ed back in 2021. And she talks about 10 different ways to tackle linguistic bias in our classrooms. And one of them, she says, ask yourself what is making the writing unclear to you as an instructor. And she talks about a Russian student, and she says she couldn't understand the argument that the student was making in the introduction until she talked to the student and realized that the student was doing a Russian translation into English, and the way that culturally, even the way that we create arguments. For example, people in Asian cultures, in the Western culture, we tend to do arguments linearly. But in Asian cultures, arguments tend to be more sort of around. And so if you have a student who is from an Asian culture, for example, and they're translating into English, you may find that the way that they articulate the argument doesn't jive with the way that you're used to, but that doesn't make it wrong. It's a conversation to be had with the student. Okay, help me understand, because it may be that you are also bringing your biases to that conversation. And if, like I said, if there isn't a specific, okay, you have to use a linear kind of argument and you're allowing the student some freedom, then you've got to bring your own biases and figure out why is it unclear to you.
Wonderful. I love that. And when you were saying you have to ask yourself or ask the question, help me to understand, that just brings to mind one of my favorite, and this is from my business background, but it applies in every sense. Dr. Stephen Covey, he's the author of the 8 or 7 highly effective, his second book was 8, highly effective leaders. What was it? Gosh, I lost the name. But basically it's things that
something habits of highly effective leaders, something
thank
like
you
that.
Thank you for that.
Right,
The
yeah.
7 habits. Thank you so much, Judi.
Right.
The 7 habits of highly effective leaders. And the 5th habit is my absolute favorite. All of them are fantastic, and I highly recommend, if you've never read the book, read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Highly Effective Leaders. And I believe he published this book before he was Dr. Stephen Covey. So it could just be under his name, Stephen Covey, but he's currently, and he's passed now, Dr. Stephen Covey. But his 5th habit is seek first to understand and then to be understood. And that's exactly what Gaby was just saying. Be curious and ask the question. how are you meaning this? What should I get out of this? And confirm your feedback. In the doctoral land, we call that member checking after the students perform their data collection, and they're in the midst of it. They're semi-structured interviews, if you would. That's one form of it. They would receive data back from, or a response back from, the participant or the interviewee, and then they would interpret it, and then they would member check. Is this what you meant by this? And they would ask the person that provided that information to them, is this what you meant by what you just said? And so that's member checking, and that's seeking first to understand, as well, as Dr. Stephen Covey would say, and as Gaby just so accurately stated in her process here and sharing the response to the question. So be curious, ask the question, show that you care, right? The students like to know that you care before they want to know what you know. Okay. I wanted to also share some stats that I didn't share earlier, but I think this kind of adds to the discussion as well. When I say that as of 2023, a record 5.6% of college students were international students, right? And this is why this is important to us. And let me go one step further here and say 10.75% of Walden University student population comes from out of the country. So if it's not enough to do it for the students that were born here and raised here, because we have to do it for them as well, but then 10.5% of the student population also comes from outside of the country. So these strategies that this working group, this team has presented to you, are for all of our students, those that were born and raised here and that speak a different dialect based on perhaps some of the communities that they inhabit, and even those students that were born outside of the country. I'm looking for questions in the chat room as I speak. I don't see any in there. I do want to say that this person that sent me these questions did say that they loved the conversation, the presentation, that the same one that we presented a couple of days ago. So I wanted the team to know that these questions were very thought-provoking based on the information that we provided to them. And I'd also like to say that at the doctoral level, these same strategies work. Pedagogical teaching, because this is a different language, this academic language is a different language for all of the students, I would venture to guess, because except for perhaps those that have, this might be their second doctorate or their third doctorate, but those certainly going into it their first time out, this is a new language for them. And so more of a pedagogical approach, teaching them and scaffolding then the learning might be the best approach, and using gentle feedback and encouraging feedback to help them to know that we care, to influence their learning. So at this time, I don't see any questions in the chat room. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in there or take yourselves off the mic and ask the questions.
I'm not seeing anything come in. I think you discussed this quite thoroughly and addressed any questions throughout the session. This is wonderful.
Then Lita, we if there's anything else from the team, any last minute pointers or anything you'd like to share, otherwise I'm going to turn it over to Lita and we can go ahead and close it out.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Lita, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for presenting. This is such great information. I actually bookmarked the video that you put in, Hillary, and can't wait to watch that. So thank you all for carving out time today to present this information. It's so important, and I hope you consider discussing this in further future webinars. So thank you. And thank you to our participants for taking time out of your Friday before the weekend. We really appreciate your dedication to our students here at Walden. I want to wish you all a happy weekend. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.